My name's Adele Onyango and welcome to another episode of Legally Clueless. No, seriously, I have no clue what I'm doing, but I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one. Hey you, welcome to episode 188 of Legally Clueless. Thank you so much for rocking with this podcast. And if this is your first time ever listening, welcome to the family. You're never too late. Audio episodes like this go out every single Monday. And we have a really awesome video series. 3 seasons are already out of different Africans sharing quite inspiring stories. And we also have our tour series where we went around Kenya. We've been to Paris, Dubai, Zimbabwe. All of those episodes are out right now on legallycluelessafrica.com. And once you head over to that website, you can sign up and join our family officially. Now back to this episode. This is the story that's coming up.
When your mom died, one of the things she told me is make sure Kevin finds the dad. So when I'm in class 6, my auntie comes and is like, so hi, would you like to meet your father? The only thing I knew was my dad's last name. That's all I knew, because my mom, when she was still alive, she would toy around that, your dad is this. I'm like, okay, so I have a dad. So I meet my dad in class 6, 5, around there. I remember being so amazed by how much he looked like me.
That is a story by Minor Mind. It's coming up a little later in this episode. It's a very powerful story. I do not have many favorites when it comes to all the stories I've recorded, but this one sticks out. This one sticks out. I'll tell you why a little later. But first, I hope you're doing super well. I hope you are surrounded by grace and that you're putting one foot in front of the other and just like trusting yourself. The song of the week this week is by Manny Wells. I actually just stumbled on this artist on TikTok. He did a TikTok about a particular African drum and how it closely mimics the sound of a human voice, which is so interesting to me. And then I ended up checking out his music and finding this particular song that I absolutely instantly loved. And his name is Manny Wells. The name of the song is Peace and it features Thames. It's really awesome. I've put a link to it in the show notes. Okay, let me give you a bit of a catch up. Thank you so much for giving me the space to just like vent in the last episode. And just speak about my uncle. No, seriously, I was thinking about it during the week, and being able to honor him on a platform that's comfortable for me is super awesome. So thanks for, rocking with this podcast and contributing to this space. The burial went, I don't know if I should say well, because what's a good or well going burial? I don't know. It was just the last time I was at a burial for someone close was 10 years ago. And I feel like I don't even remember very many moments from my mom's funeral. I just have like random flashes. I can see particular people who were there, specific moments, but I can't, even the lowering of the coffin, I actually cannot remember that. So being at this burial for someone pretty close, and it was almost like I was attending my first funeral. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think the things that struck me is just the finality. I'll never get over the finality of death. Like, it's just so permanent. So permanent, unlike anything else. And then I realized that I'm really an empath. Oh my goodness. As in, I knew this before, but literally seeing particular individuals crying would evoke an emotion in me that was just like intense. And then I saw a family member who I hadn't seen in such a long time, who just reminds me of my dad. And literally, I just like felt all of this emotion even just coming from it. I was just like, okay, I guess I am an empath. I think also the entire experience just got me reflecting on family. I am definitely at that age where you get to see your family as humans. You see their strengths, you see their flaws, and it's okay because you're now seeing them as humans. I think what happens when we're kids, and if adults are not careful, they reinforce this, is we put our family members on pedestals and attach such unattainable expectations on them. And we do this without even intentionally trying to get to know them, to know if those expectations we've put are even just remotely close to what they would do. And I think as kids, we just use the little information the adults share with us, what we learn about family, and we keep building on this as we grow up until family members are all about specific roles and not about who they are as individuals, as humans, as their own beings. I don't know. I had low-key thought about that earlier this year. And then, obviously being around family, you start reflecting about family, those who are here, those who are gone. And I remember just thinking about that and trying to figure out, how can I do things differently for my family if the universe expands many things for me? Oh my goodness. That is a story for another day. I think we need to get into the story that's by Mina. I really love this story. This is actually also on season 3 of our video series. This is how much I like it. This is how important I think his story is, because it's something that we don't talk about a lot, which is the quest for a father's love. 100 African stories on Legally Clueless. Stories from Africa.
My name is Kevin Mina. I am from Murang'a, Nakuru, and Nairobi. So my childhood, I was born in Nakuru, and then we moved to Eldoret. What I do remember fondly was my mother. So she was big on love. Her love language was touch, so she was big on that. I remember that so fondly because part of my expressive way is through that and just the vulnerability. And I think that led on to who I am today. So my mom was a single parent. And when we were in Eldoret, I was under this housekeeper who was not really taking care of me well. So there was a point I was so skinny. This was before even I started school. So skinny, my legs were literally like this. So my shosho hears of this and she drives from Nakuru. She had a pickup. She drives all the way. My guka is carried on the backside of the pickup. So she comes to Eldoret, takes me to Nakuru, and then I'm given a big bowl of uji. So this is from my relatives telling me, because I was really young, I can't really remember. But I remember the uji aspect is true because every morning growing up in her house was uji time. Like I'd start with uji and then go on with everything else. So she gave me a big bowl of uji, started feeding me, and then I gained some weight and I was healthy again. So part of my schooling was not in Eldoret, it was in Nakuru. So I started off in Nakuru, studied up to class 3, was being taken care of by my grandmother. And then my mom was working in Nairobi. And then tragedy struck when I was in class 3, when I was 9 years old. She passed away. So I was brought up by my grandmother. When she passed away, I remember crying, and I was like, I needed to go to Nairobi because my young me, for some reason, thought being in the city was the way, because I'd see my cousins coming, I was speaking Kikuyu, that was what I knew, but I wanted to watch Spider-Man. So I cried and, I went to live with my auntie. That's where my Nairobi journey began. So Eldoret, Nakuru, Nairobi. So processing grief at that age was tricky because, first of all, it was interesting. I had an event on May and I did a poem about this. It was the first time I ever addressed this. And now I can talk about it, so I'm at a good place. But at that point, I think I was more shocked at the fact that death had knocked at our door. Like there's no one I knew close to me that had died. And then this was like my mom, like I'd seen her through the sickness. She became so frail. She got to a point where she used to even walk while, bending. Like it was bad. She was diagnosed with meningitis. And she was one of those people, I think I got this from how she wouldn't open up. So by the time people were realizing she was sick, it was too late. And she passed on. So at that time, processing grief was very interesting because I was like, wait, like death, this is how death is like, You see those long convoys of vehicles, family members you'd never seen before coming to bury your mom, and you're asking yourself, what are these guys before all this? So it was more about being cognizant of the fact that death was here. And so I was more focused on that. I didn't grieve her. And I realized this as I grew up as a teenager. I used to talk to her for some weird reason. I used to talk to her and I used to imagine her response, so I'd not really let her go. And this one time when I decided to actually let her go and decide, she's dead, and I decided to put that away. I remember waking up sometime after she was in a dream of mine. And in this dream, I remember thinking about her, but I couldn't see her face because I'd grown. I was about 15 years old. I couldn't remember her face because the memory of her was so blur. So even this poetry that I did on May 21st was called Fading. It's losing someone twice. So the grief process has taken up to now. I feel like I'm still allowing myself to sort of be at peace with it, to accept it, to appreciate her. So my relatives have been sending me photos because now I'm asking questions like, how was she? Because I just remember one dancing style that she had. That's all I remember. And the fact that she used to love hugging me and kissing me and assuring me and reassuring me rather and just talking to me. So the main reason why I wanted to come to Nairobi, coming into Nairobi was, to be honest, at that point, the only reason why I came is just to watch Spider-Man because my cousin used to talk about it and I was like, damn, is this Spider-Man here? Like, we had the CDs. So that was one of the reasons why I caused a tantrum and cried and cried. Gosh. And then I came to Nairobi. So in my family, I've always been the soft guy, the guy who's will cry. I'll cry when I'm happy, when I'm sad. So compared to my cousin is a rough guy. So even the cliques that he was hanging out with were, the rough guys who were bougie as well. So here's a guy who had 2 front brown teeth, coming skinny, trying to fit into the clique. It took some time, but eventually I got there. It got to a point where I was part of the family and I was part of the gang. And we were so close with my cousin, I think even I used to refer to his mom as mom. I don't remember the last time I called her auntie. She's my mom. He's my brother. Went through my elementary, finished. My grandmom decided we need to be thrown to Naivasha Boys boarding. And this is where the next journey begins. So at around class 6, I remember, so my mom had 2 sisters and 2 brothers. She was the firstborn, so there were 5. Yes, so there were 5. So I was staying with one of her sisters, who is the second-born, but the third-born, actually the fourth-born, was working at Barclays. Coincidentally, my dad was a manager at Barclays. So this my auntie told me later on, but she said when your mom died, one of the things she told me is make sure Kevin finds the dad because my mom was single. So when I'm in class 6, my auntie comes and is like, so hi, would you like to meet your father? The only thing I knew was my dad's last name. That's all I knew because my mom, when she was still alive, she would toy around that, your dad is this. I'm like, okay, so I have a dad. So I meet my dad in class 6, 5, around there. And the first thing I remember, I was still in Naivasha boarding. I remember being so amazed by how much he looked like me. Like I was like, oh my, like it was so cool. It was so cool just watching him and being like, whoa, he's dope. And then he was driving a Mercedes, so I knew, yeah. So meet up my dad. It was a flip side of the coin because part of me was really angry because I saw my mom going through, she went through a lot. She sold everything. By the time she was passing away, we were living at her cousin's place. So part of me was angry because I was like, where were you? But the other side of me was happy and sort of knew this was the beginning of a new life. So I started a prayer that I used to have. I was like, God, just help one day I go leave my dad, because there's something about hopping from one home to another. When you close this holiday, you're going to your shosho. The other holiday, you're going to your auntie. You don't really have a place. Everyone tells you, you can call me mom, which is a good thing because you have many moms. But as a child, you start even having compartments in your brain where these problems are for this auntie, these problems are for this auntie. So it was always a situation where I was always the kid who, Kevin, what do you want? Whatever you can. Like it took me a while to start realizing that you can actually ask for help. You can actually say this and what you really want instead of letting people drive or just treat you as they are willing to, simply because you feel like you are like a problem in their life. Like if I wasn't there, they probably didn't have to split the budget. So at this point, I'm like, it's my dad. I need to go live with my dad. Because that's where I belong. So went through primary school, and then in class 8, when I was finishing my KCPE, so everyone is scrambling to find a school, which by the way, I performed very well. I won't tell you what I got, but I really performed very well. So I think my dad saw that as an opportunity, and he called my shosho, said, I have a school. It's in Nairobi. So I went to Aga Khan High School, Nairobi. It's about 15 minutes from where we lived. So everyone knew what he was doing, but I feel like even when we talked about it as a family, it was a good opportunity for me to finally have the chance to go live with my dad. And you can imagine at this point, both family, there's friction. Both families, there's the idea that, okay, Kevin needs to go stay with his dad, but there's the idea that there's history here that we do not like. So my auntie talks to me about it. She she really talks to my grandmother and tells her, there's a good opportunity for Kevin. And voila, pack my bags, heading again to Nairobi, this time in a bougie place, Westlands, I get there, I meet my 2 brothers, I'm like, oh, okay, so I have brothers now. I meet my stepmom, I'm like, whoa, okay. Now that is another story about now trying to fit into that place, because I'm from Naivasha Boys Boarding. Now I want to give you the picture. From Naivasha Boys Boarding, these are public boys boarding school. The environment there is crazy. You have to be hardcore survivor. Now remember how I was a soft kid? Now coming to Aga Khan High School, now I was, I was the brewy guy, like the bad boy. Aga Khan High School is a mixed international private day school. So we have 2 aspects. We have girls here and the fact that I'm going home every day. So there's the risk of being spoiled and there's the risk of being distracted, which happened immediately. I get into class, I'm shy, and I remember this one time a girl came and touched my shoulder. She's like, hi, what's your name? And I'm like, oh, my name is Kevin. And I don't know what I said, but I made her laugh, and that was it. I was like, I can make a girl feel this way. Done. I used to have a schedule of how many girls I'm gonna make smile the next day. It was crazy. Now my dad is, because this is the next part of the story, my dad is very, the guy, academics, you need to be doing this, you need to be going. So my academics obviously started dipping. So I'm having a hard time settling at home because it's a new environment. I'm trying to really fit in. I'm trying to really act cool, working in the estate, show people that, I've been here, because guys were like asking my little brothers, oh, this is your big brother. Kwani, where has he been? I'm like, yeah, I was studying in another country. So decided came back. I was really trying. In school, I'm trying to fit in. I don't want anyone to suspect where I'm from, my past. I'm trying to really, when kids are talking about their dads and everything, I'm like, my dad. I was one of those kids that was always excited to see their dad come into school, because I never took that for granted. But now, since my academic were dipping, my relationship with my dad became very, very difficult. And I started becoming, I was really focused on getting girls to be my girlfriends. Sigh. And the education didn't really matter to me. So we get into this very salty relationship with my dad. I started hiding stuff from him. I was feeling uncomfortable. Part of me was feeling angry still. I was carrying all these things that were never addressed. I'm supposed to fit in as if things were always okay. So it got to a point where I'd hear my dad come to the parking lot and I would leave, and just go into my room, hide myself. Their days would go weeks, days on end without even speaking a word to each other. And part of it was, when I think of it in hindsight, being a child and just thinking like, everything and this guy doesn't know anything. What is he telling me? Where was he all this time? I know what I'm doing. And still being part of me being entitled to the fact that you're my dad. You're supposed to make up for the time that, So it was really tough because, and sometimes I tell this and people may not understand, but for me, the relationship with my dad was very core. In my heart, I craved it. There's a time I sat him down and I was crying and I was like, you don't say hi to me like you do to my brothers. Like those tiny things, like, coming to my room and saying hi, those tiny things were very important to me. And I always felt like they were not given to me as they were supposed to. And again, in hindsight, my dad is human. He has this new child that he had years back, and he's trying to really bring him home, and I am being closed, expecting him to still open up. It was very chaotic in my head. So it got to a point where around my third year, I remember being in my room and crying and asking God, please, I don't know what's right, but I do know what's wrong. And I know what I need to focus on. I just need a relationship with my dad. I just need to be his best friend. And that, I think, for me, is a very core part of my life, because I changed everything. I broke up with all my girlfriends, needless to say, cut all the people who were not adding value into my life, and I started really focusing on what was important at that time. It was my books. If I didn't like it, I'll do that and get done with it. Really rose top of the ranks. I became a class prefect, started topping my school, top 5. And as fate would have it, my dad and I became close friends. We were, he was finally smiling. He was finally nodding and giving me those signs of approval, because I was becoming the child that maybe he had envisioned me to become, or he wanted me to become. And we are best friends again. Now, we're living happily ever after, and my Form 4 comes. I'm doing my KCSE, very dedicated. Again, I pass very well. I won't tell you what I got, but I really good. University were calling me, guys. And so my dad had other ideas. She wanted me to attend Strathmore University. And for context, when I started living with my dad, there was the idea that, you live with him, but after Form 4, you would go back to your primary fam, which was understandable. But at this point, you can imagine I'd build a relationship with my dad. Man, like we were boys. We used to take now drives, private drives, me and him alone. Like I used to sit at the co-driver's seat. That's a big deal. At that time, that's a big deal, because previously I just come to the car, get to the back seat, I'm not even talking. This time, it's like, oh, guy, what's up? It was a big deal. So the relationship is tight. I didn't know that was the agreement when I joined this new family. So I'm just finding out. So my dad throws this idea to the family. Till this day, I don't know the details. But again, friction was there. And one time, I'm on a phone call with my dad. I'd gone to visit my grandma. And, he says, why don't you just stick there a little longer? And I knew what that meant. And I remember breaking down, going to my grandma. She's hugging me and she's like, yeah, I'm always here for you, trying to encourage me. And God, I felt like I lost everything, because remember my primary goal, just have a relationship with my dad. Everything else, the performing in school, was just like an additive to this main goal of having a relationship with my dad. And again, I was being taken back to square one. Like, I have to start all over again. So apart from feeling used and betrayed, it was one of those moments that I felt that I just wanted my dad to own me. And I'll later understand the context, which I'm going to talk about. But again, life started. So I rush, try to apply for public uni. I get admitted to KU to pursue a degree in communication, bachelor's in communication and media studies. I'm like, yay. So I joined KU. But before then, at this gap time before joining university, another core moment of my life happened. So I really sunk into depression, because I was back at my auntie's place, back at feeling like that problem in their life, because again, I've just got into their lives. They weren't prepared. They were like, oh, things were going well, now you're back. Of course, they wouldn't say it that way, but you can have a sense of like budgets have to be rearranged. So I used to stay at home and I'm really depressed and I'm really thinking. And that's when I started creating content. So one time in my room, I remember recording a video. I was speaking in a Luya accent, and it was so funny. I think if you go to my Instagram, the first post ever is about that guy. And I remember watching it. It was one of those moments where you watch something, you haven't looked at yourself in the mirror in a long time, until you start thinking, wow, this is how I look. And then I posted it, went to sleep. Next day I have like 10 views and 2 comments, bro, you're funny. And I was like, yes, I'm a star. So I started creating. I got so obsessed with creating, because it was a channel to escape, make myself happy, but also make other people happy. So it was sort of like an autocatalytic process where I feed you, you feed me back with the dopamine and everything. So I started even now going into characters, I do different characters, a mother and a son and a dad, like the same guy, and started getting into editing and scripting. And I decided, I'm gonna do everything that I feel I can do just to make myself happy. I got myself a guitar. I started writing poetry. I started a blog. I started all these things, and that's when I opened up. In fact, around this time is the first time we met with Adele, because my school invited me to do like a luminous speech, and that's when Adele and I met, and I told her my interest to get into media. She didn't know this then, but the boy was going through a lot. At that time, I was really intentional on opening up my life and just going hard on what I felt was right for me, and not let other people's sort of disagreements affect me. Because all this time, that's what was happening. Because my dad could not agree with this other party, I was in between, and no one was asking me, bro, how are you feeling? I wanted to really say, you guys don't understand. I had a relationship with this man. That's all I want. I don't care whether he's the one paying the fee or he's the one buying me the clothes. I just want that relationship with him. No one addressed that, and that hurt me. But anyway, I had some money saved. I enrolled myself into an acting program, an acting class. I met amazing people there. My whole world opened up into a new world of creativity, and I sunk into it deeply. So get into KU. I know my basics. I know the hard work. I've been with girls before in high school. I'm seeing guys acting like myself in high school. Hi, me, I'm way ahead. I'm just like, guys, Z, man, So people immediately, even among my peers, and this is something that I noticed, there was always a form of like, man, Kevin, how you so focused, but for me, you remember that Form 3 change that happened? I just extrapolated that into university. And so my first year, my GPA, I just had to make sure it was up on top. So moving to my auntie, life moves on. My auntie gets engaged, things are moving on. And so in my second year, another turbulence happens. And I remember I was very obsessed with working hard to get some money to move out and be independent, because I felt if I can be independent where I'm not depending on anyone to give me anything, then I can easily create a relationship without expectations. Because I've always felt the fact that we have an ideal of what your dad should do, your mom should do, it doesn't mean to say that you don't do what you're supposed to do as a dad or a mom. But I feel like the fact that we already have an ideal as kids, we then come from a point of entitlement. And you're looking at your dad, you should be doing this, and then you end up hating them or something. So I didn't want that to be in my head. I just wanted to create a relationship because I loved this person. So I was really obsessed with that. And I remember I used to do activations. I used to even sell beer in clubs just to get that little extra coin to get myself a guitar, to keep paying for my acting classes. And I did all sorts of things. I did all sorts of tiny jobs that didn't need a degree or any paper, that you would really do. Supermarkets, just selling tissue there. Hi, unataka hii tissue? Ni thika kuliko hii. You don't know anything. But you're just trying to make that extra cash. So one time, because things are happening for my auntie and things are moving on, she says, you should think about moving out. And I'm in second year, I'm in my long holiday. I knew I could take care of myself if I was on holiday forever, because I can get jobs here and there. But I'm thinking, if I'm going to school, how am I gonna take care of myself henceforth? The argument was, you go to school, you're going to take care of your rent for the first 1 month, and then you can, since you're doing jobs anyway. So that was the other point where I decided, let me call my dad, because I kept on thinking about it, and I was like, this guy is alive. I don't know how he is mentally. He's a Gemini. Maybe that has something to do with everything. I decided, let me be the bigger person. So this time I was looking for a job at Kawa Wendani. I was looking for a house at Kawa Wendani. It was a tiny house. It was like 3 tiles, the width's wide. And then it was basically a corridor that they just decided to put a roof because it was extra space and could accommodate someone else. And I called him, and all I needed from him was allowance. To just know that I have something coming in every month that can help me take care of my immediate bills as I work on taking care of my school and everything else that I could take it. But just to know that I have something standard that I can depend on. So I call him and I'm shaking because we haven't talked since I left. We haven't talked. This is like left around 2017. This is like 2019 towards the end of it. And I'm shaking. I'm like, yeah, I just turned 20. How are you? He's like, good. I'm like, can we have a chat? He's like, yeah, sure. Yeah, why don't you come? We have lunch. So I go. So the day that I'm going to meet him, the next day I'm supposed to move out. So I'm meeting him the day before I move out. So we go, we have a chat, and I'm like telling him the situation. I'm telling him about my jobs, about my errands in the clubs, and how mamas have been hitting on me. And I'm like, yeah, man, it's been cool, man. It's been real, man. I'm learning a lot. I was really trying to show him that I'm not struggling. Like, bro, I got me. All I need, though, is this tiny money that I've been looking at. I even had a budget and everything. And I'm like, so if my meals are like this, and he listens very, very attentively. And when I finish talking, he looks at me and he says, so you're moving out, right? I'm like, yeah. Okay. So how about instead of going, you just come? Like, instead of going where you're going, just make a detour and come because you're moving out anyway. I was like, yeah. Is that an option? I was like, that has always been an option, Kevin. I was like, okay. So I go, pack my things, and I remember as I'm leaving that next day at the door, I look at my auntie and I'm like, oh, by there, I'm not going to the house, I'm going to my dad's. And I see the horror in her face, and it's chaos. I would later understand when, years later, we talk about this, and just because of that idea that this one party was winning, that was the whole chaos around her feelings and everything, and the pressure that she had in her life. And so I moved back into the house, and we had a conversation with my dad, and he talked to me about the dynamics of the family and how he was my dad, but even he could only do too much to sort of say, I want this for Kevin, but if you guys are not willing to sort of have that for him, that is okay. So moved back into the house, and when I moved, I had some conditions for myself. I was like, okay, now I'm an artist now, so if you see me with racket jeans, I knew you wanted me to do business, but I'm not into that shit no more. So if you see me with ragged jeans, please don't judge. I have an acting gig, so sometimes I might come here at 12 a.m. So can I get a gate key, please? And all those conditions were, okay, cool. So I moved in like nothing happened. And that's when I started really just unraveling things and realizing sometimes when you're a child, decisions are made for you. But it gets to a point where you have to make decisions for yourself. Because if I never made this phone call. And that's why I started realizing that this ideal that we have, I was waiting for my dad to call me. But I give the benefit of the doubt, he's human. He is a lot like me. He has his own egos. He has, his own sort of upbringing. He's to his 50s. So he has already how he's brought up and how he thinks. So he may not be able to compromise things, but if I am able to just compromise my egos and what I think an ideal relationship, even girlfriend, boyfriend, even wife, husband, like I started thinking about those things very differently and breaking all these ideals that you're told, when you're son to your dad, he should be taking care of all of this. When you're a husband, you should be paying all the bills. There's no compromise on that. I will listen to your advice, but I will really take a deep think about it and decide what is it that matters to me deeply. So I'm back at home. Bills are taken care of. I just have to focus on school. Can you imagine? And then I have so much free time. But in my mind, I knew I cannot be comfortable because I have history with these people. So I know I cannot be comfortable. So immediately I throw myself into trying to make something of myself. I go hard on content creation. And around this time, I'm journaling a lot. I have like 2 journals. I started going through them. And this is where Minor Mind is born. So I came across a piece of content online by a guy called Matthias J. Baker. He's a psychologist. And he does the same type of content that I do, only that he's a psychologist, so he gives advice. But it's just watching the cinematic bit of it, such that even though I have nothing important to say, people will watch me because the quality is good, the lighting is hitting me nicely, you know, my eyes are shining and whatnot. And I made a commitment, I have to say, for a camera to just create whatever I'm seeing here, because it looks so easy to do and I already have it in my mind. And so that's what I did, saved up for a camera. Before I did, I went to pitch to my dad. I had this long pitch once again, because this guy is tough. And I pitched to him and, you know, I'm there, I'm giving my points. And he asked me, you know, what's the business return on this? I'm looking at him, I'm like, but you're my dad. Remember that ideal again. You're my dad, you should support me. I was like, no, but what's the business return on this? And he tells me, when you have that cleared, like the business return, come we talk about it again. So I'm like, okay, adios, my guy. I just want to create content and have fun. So I decided to save. I saved for 2 years. And last year, June, that was my 22nd birthday. I had enough money to buy a camera, to buy lighting, to buy sound, to just set up something in my room. And I remember telling my dad, and he was like, who are you? You know, who are you? So did that, got my first camera. I started recording the first videos, but they were so vulnerable that I used to keep them for myself. So around this time, I'd been trying to get a job to get a position at Nation Media Group, because I was really passionate about I started writing for the paper, the opinion section, because it's always open. I just started writing on that just to be on their portfolio, and not really to write and, you know, just to show them, guys, I'm writing. So you just call me one of these days. But I used to take my CV and pitch ideas to them, because I really wanted to, as soon as I can, just be able to fend for myself. So even though I'm staying in this roof, if I'm told to move out, I have enough money to take on myself for 6 months without doing anything. So that was always at the back of my head. So I get this camera. The first video I did was about rejection, because I'd just been from an interview at Nation and I'd been rejected badly. So I did that video and then I put it for myself in my drive because I couldn't post it. It was too vulnerable. And I started doing videos, but I used to put them for myself as video journals. So I would rewatch them. And then this one day I decided, let me post this. Took it out, put some music underneath, edited it nicely, posted it, went to sleep. I kid you not that the next day, I had about 50 new comments on that post alone and like 100 new followers. And that's when I knew this was it. So every day I started posting content. And I started becoming very intentional about reading books, because this content has to come from somewhere. You know, you talk about love so much, you have nothing else to talk about because your experience is so tiny. You now start looking for books that can feel into your perspective. And I started being very intentional about reading. I read this one book that changed my life. It was something about selling his Ferrari. The monk who sold his Ferrari. That changed everything. And went on by the same author, reading the 5 a.m. Club. So I was very intentional. For the first time, I felt like I was owning my life. I was waking up early. I was writing. I remember one time when Dad found me at 4 a.m. journaling. And it's like, is that schoolwork? I'm like, no. So he woke up at 4 a.m. to just journal. Like it was such a new idea to him. I think he was like, whoa, there's something here. And that's what I focused on, just building myself and expanding my perspective. Started going to schools to give speeches. Went to Nation every single day, even though they were telling me no and telling me to leave my CV there. Eventually they called me, and the rest in that area is history. But I was very consistent with Minor Mind, and it grew to what we are today. My dad and I are best friends. I'm creating from a point of happiness now than previously. It was always about, like I could only write when I was heartbroken. Like I was like, okay, I need to be creative. Then I put some depressing music and I go low and deep and sad. But as I took control of my life, I reckon, I started opening up to the idea that even the content that I'm creating is beyond me. Because sometimes when you see DMs of people telling you that, there's one I got when I was at 5K followers, and it was a lady. She said, I was just contemplating suicide until I came through this piece of yours. And that changed the trajectory of everything. Every piece that I've created, I send to her, and then I go sleep. I don't even care who else sees it. As long as I create it and send to her, I know she probably needs it as much as I do. And for me, it was learning that the easiest content to create, the most sustainable, was the best content I created. And it has been the biggest, the most impactful content that I've created. And that's what I do every day. So creating a safe space through words. is my core belief. And growing into other areas like my studies and my journalism, because they all merge together. And I think that is a journey that without all these components and letdowns and things that force me to go to a certain corner and then break out, without all those, I don't think I would be the person I am today.
Catch more African stories in the next episode of Legally Clueless. I hope you enjoyed that story. I find Mina to be super inspiring, and I'm very excited to kind of like watch him unlock a pretty powerful part of his life. I just feel that for him. I feel he's so awakened at such an early age, man. Only power and powerful things can come from that. I found his story to be so necessary because we never really talk about fathers, especially African fathers. And actually, we do talk about it, but we mask our feelings in humor. So we'll joke about how African fathers do not show emotion, and we'll laugh about it online. But I think it's so important in whatever relationship for you to figure out how you communicate love or caring for someone and making it very clear that that's how you communicate it. I think sometimes we think love from specific people or roles we have in our lives. We think that those roles communicate love in a specific way. But those rules are taken up by very different people. Mothers are different, spouses are different, fathers are different. And speaking from an African context, I think if more families sat down and were frank about how they communicate love and care, it would save us all a lot of childhood trauma. So I thought this was so important because, again, if you hope to be a father, I just hope as well that you are able to ensure your children know that you love them. I also was so amazed at how Mina could just see the humanity behind the role of father. I think sometimes it's hard to do that with family. It's hard to do it with family who are like mother or father because, you know, and rightly so, you're like, hey, you're meant to look out for me. You brought me here. Why do I have to tell you? What did you expect? You know what I mean? And so for him to like be calm enough and mature enough and humble enough to see the humanity behind the role of father, I was like, wow, that's taught me something. You know, it's really just ties back to what I said earlier in the episode. I think I'm really starting to see family as humans and just like extending grace. Just like one of my recent funeral take-homes. Yeah, so I think you should go to YouTube and watch Mina sharing the story. It adds a different flavor to it. Our YouTube channel is Legally Clueless, but you can check out the show notes. There's a link to it there. Also in the show notes, if you want to share your story on this podcast, all you have to do is fill out the Google form. Make sure you put a contact that you check often, and then await my email. I actually did record a story by somebody who listens to the podcast, and that story should be going out in episode 189. It has everything to do with alcoholism. It's quite a powerful story. I really can't wait for you to hear it, but it's coming out next week. Remember to sign up to join the Legally Clueless community. Head over to legallycluelessafrica.com. You can also catch this podcast on Trace FM in Kenya. If you go to traceradio.co.ke, first and foremost, they have a brand new app that makes it super easy for you to listen to. But you can catch us there on Monday and Wednesday at 1 p.m. and 11 p.m. and on Friday at 1 p.m. I'm going to end this episode here, but as usual, always know that I'm wishing you nothing but grace and peace. That's it for this episode of Legally Clueless. You can share this podcast with your friends. You can keep it for yourself. I'm not judging. Just make sure you're here next week for the next episode.